the AllThingsXR podcast. Where you can get the best ARVR analyzers from the biggest names in the field. Hi everyone, welcome to the AllThingsXR podcast. I'm Mojtaba. In today's episode, we have a conversation with Alban Denoyel, co-founder and CEO of Sketchfab. Hi Alban.
Hi Mojtaba.
Thanks very much. Welcome to the AllThingsXR podcast. Can you tell us more about yourself and what you do?
Sure. So I'm the co-founder and CEO of Sketchfab. And so I started Sketchfab and I run everything that is non-technical. I have two technical co-founders, and so I handle a bunch of things.
Okay, so can you tell us more about your background and how you started Sketchfab? What was the initial idea of it?
Sure. So I was born and raised in Paris, in France. I went through business school. I went through business school in France, and I've always been passionate about content in general, photography, sculpture, and the concept of publishing. And after business school, my first job was working with a photography magazine and gallery. I was the first employee. And it was a tiny company, and we were publishing a print magazine and then exhibiting some photojournalists in a physical gallery. And I was handling a lot of different things, but mostly working with the CEO and founder on things like operations and finance and all that sort of things. And all the online side of things as well, like starting the website, starting the subscriptions for the magazine and so on. But I've always wanted to start my own company. And after 4 years, I decided it was time to move on. And so I left the company and started meeting a lot of people just to get ideas. And around that time, I also started looking more into, I was doing sculpture as a hobby, and through that I started looking into 3D printing and 3D capture and things like that. And so that was 2011, and I was telling everybody about 3D printing. It was very new back then in France, and I was at a party telling everybody about 3D printing, and I got introduced to a guy who had been a 3D programmer for 15 years. And we had never heard about 3D printing, but I just started working on 3D in the browser. So his name was Cedric, and it turned out, as he was working in the video game industry, and it turned out he had just spent a year building the first WebGL framework out there, and he was hired by Mozilla to make the first demo of WebGL for the launch of Firefox 4 back in 2011. And so we were in January 2012, and so he had already built an MVP of a web-based 3D player, the first web-based 3D player, and so he showed that to me, found it pretty cool. He had built it in part because he was working with 3D artists in the gaming industry, and they had no way to show or share their 3D work in 3D, so they were using screenshots and videos to share their 3D work, and so there had to be a better way, and I was fascinated by the concept, and so I started helping him out on everything that was non-technical, and yes, that's kind of how it got started.
So Sketchfab started in 2011, right?
2012 officially, but like the MVP started in 2011, yeah.
Great. So as you said, Sketchfab has been around for a while, and I'm sure it has been a journey with lots of ups and downs. Can you tell us more about this journey?
yes. So we started in 2012. We launched in March 2012. So we're about to celebrate our 9th anniversary. And when we launched, I mean, the initial challenge was that so we're entirely relying on WebGL, and WebGL was very, very early. It was only running in alpha or beta versions of the browsers. And so the first challenge was that whenever we would send Sketchfab, like the URL to someone to check it out, either a partner or a potential customer or a journalist, would click on it and it wouldn't work. And we would tell them, hey, you have to install the beta version of Chrome or the alpha version of Firefox, or you have to and it would not work. So that was, that was the initial challenge. But at launch, we managed to get an article on BlenderNation.com, which was the main news site for the Blender community. And that's how we got our first 1,000 users. And from there, and I mean, we were the first solution doing that on the market. And from there, it just kept growing. So yeah, we got this article on Blender Nation, which got us this initial traction. I was doing a lot of startup contests and pitches and competitions, and so we got a lot of. We won some startup awards, which got us like free office space and also exposure to investors and so on. And so at the end of 2012, we raised our first round of financing with angels investors back in France. And then we got invited to participate in Web Forward, which was an accelerator by Mozilla to help startups get up to speed. And so we spent 3 months in California, like in San Francisco, to participate in the program. And we kept getting validations like this, startup accelerators and news articles and all that. And the product was the first, and it was good and easy to use, and so we got traction. And then I don't know how much details should I go into?
Yeah. Please go on.
But then in 2013, so at the end of 2012, we came back from the Mozilla Accelerator. We came back to Paris, to France, and we knew we needed to go back to the US because we wanted to be a global platform, and we didn't want to take the risk of a US-based company doubling us and becoming the YouTube of 3D files instead of us. And so we kept applying to US-based accelerators. We got accepted into Techstars, which is an accelerator in New York. Mm-hmm. And so we moved to New York in early 2013. And so this was a big step for us to be able to move to the US and have the external validation of the accelerator. It was a very competitive process, like 2,000 startups applying and only 10 getting accepted. And so this got us our initial network in the US and exposure and all that. We got to meet a lot of all the successful founders in New York. So like the founders of Foursquare, for example, and Shapeways, and a bunch of startups in New York, and Tumblr and all that. And so the program was 3 months, and it put a lot of pressure on accelerating and growing the user base. And so we really accelerated at that time. And then at the end of 2013, we raised our first round of VC money, so like institutional funds, 2 million. So that was a big step for us as well. We raised with a fund in the UK, Balderton, and then a fund in Paris, Partech, and then a bunch of other funds. Mm-hmm. So that was 2013. So this allowed us to start hiring people. So at that time, we were like 10 people. And then 2014 was a year with a lot of integrations. A lot of our a key part of what we do is the ecosystem of integrations around us, either with 3D software or with publishing platforms. And today we're integrated with more than 100 3D offering tools, so like Blender and Modo and Maya and Substance, a lot of capture tools and all that. And then we're also integrated with a lot of publishing networks like Facebook and Twitter and WordPress and LinkedIn and Reddit and all that. And so in 2014, we spent a lot of energy growing this ecosystem, partnering with a lot of tools. So Blender was the first major one, and then 3ds Max and a bunch of others. And this really helped us become kind of the go-to solution for content creators to publish their work. And then early 2015, we lined up 3 major partnerships. One with Adobe. We got natively integrated with Photoshop so that you could publish 3D files from Photoshop to Sketchfab directly. We were the first third-party integration in Photoshop. It was really a major milestone, which meant Adobe would start promoting Sketchfab to their user base, which was enormous exposure for us. And then we got integrated with the HoloLens One as a sharing function. And so we shipped with HoloLens One. They had a tool to create 3D files with your hands. And we were the sharing function. And so we were one of the 12 launching partners of HoloLens, next to like Disney and Dassault and NASA. So we were the only startups there. And so again, it was a huge validation for us.
Yeah.
And then right after that, we got whitelisted in the Facebook newsfeed, which is extremely rare and really hard to negotiate. Like it only happened to guys like YouTube and Vimeo and SoundCloud, like much bigger platforms.
Yeah. So
this was another huge validation. And so all this happened like around Q1 2015. And this got us a lot of momentum and exposure. And so that's when we raised our Series A. So we raised $7 million with First More Capital here in New York. And so this was really a key milestone and a key step to really accelerate, grow the team and have the means of our ambitions to become a much bigger company and platform. And so that was 2015. And yeah, part of the pitch was to explain that content creation was becoming mainstream with 3D capture coming to our smartphones.
Exactly.
And back then it was Tango in Android phones coming to market. And then explaining also that 3D content consumption was starting to get mainstream with VR and AR coming to market. So that was in 2015. And then things started slowing down a bit, I guess, in 2016 when it became clear that content creation, like free capture and Tango was going to take much longer to be adopted, like for a number of reasons, but like the form factors were huge. Only a few smartphone makers were adopting this. And then there was no habit around free capture.
Yeah.
And so there was still a lot of education and evangelization to do. And then on the VR and AR side of things, we started entering like the VR winter 2016, 2017, like everybody realizing the sales of VR headsets were in the thousands, not in the millions. And so it was very far from a mass market product for now. And so that was like 2016, 2017, realizing that things would take time and would take longer to unfold. And so in 2018, we started monetizing the platform and building the business and offering new solutions for B2B use cases and companies wanting to leverage Sketchfab for things like e-commerce and product configurators and things like that. And it was received very well, and we got a lot of traction early on. we already had a lot of companies using the product, and so we started exposing more features for our APIs and doubling down on better rendering and faster loading and all that. And yes, started onboarding more and more customers. At the time, we also launched the Sketchfab store, so a marketplace where people buy and sell 3D assets. This was also a key milestone for our users who had a way to monetize their content. It was important for them. And then a key milestone for the rest of the market, because we were, and we still are, the first marketplace where you can actually see 3D files before buying them. And it's kind of crazy because it's just like, it's in other 3D marketplaces, you see screenshots of 3D files, and it's as if you were buying a movie based on the thumbnail of the movie. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
This was a big paradigm shift for the 3D marketplace world. And then we also shipped our download API, which meant any 3D VR AR tool could integrate a Sketchfab search bar to easily download, search, and import Sketchfab content without leaving the third-party application, and with integrations with guys like Unity and Unreal and Blender and C40 and the Facebook ecosystem, the Adobe ecosystem, the Mozilla ecosystem, and so on. And so that was 2018, and then 2019 we kept growing, improving the product and growing the business. And then in 2020, we released Sketchfab for Teams, which was a new solution to let several people within an organization collaborate around a Sketchfab account. And so essentially have companies have their own Sketchfab in a way, opening up a new use case for us around internal use and collaboration and productivity. And again, it was very well received, especially with COVID and a lot of brands adopting 3D solutions because they were, with the end of physical trade shows and physical samples and, acceleration of digital workflows, a lot of companies understanding the power of 3D, shifting to 3D workflows, and then leveraging Sketchfab for either internal use, like collaboration, or external use, like e-commerce and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Great. So thanks very much, Alban. I think it was about the same days last year that Apple introduced LiDAR sensors in its devices. Can you tell us how it has impacted the 3D scanning field and how the democratization of 3D content will change the online world?
So before the LiDAR and the iPhone, capture would come either through photogrammetry, so taking a ton of pictures and stitching them together, or professional, like pro-grade LiDAR solutions, like things, LiDAR scanners costing like $10,000, and they are a big piece of hardware. And so, LiDAR. There was already depth sensors with Tango, but it got discontinued, and it was much lower resolution. So the LiDAR on the iPhone is, step one, but it's a good trade-off between quality and speed. So it's like extremely fast compared to photogrammetry. Mm-hmm. It's much cheaper than pro-grade LiDAR. And so, for hobbyists and makers and people discovering 3D capture, it's just a great way to get in. And it's just, it's a great way to kickstart user-generated 3D content at scale. Just because it means any iPhone owner has a 3D scanner in their pocket.
Exactly.
And so it's still very early and new, and it hasn't been really exposed by Apple much. Like they haven't really communicated on that side of things. But we can see. Just the fact that. So the iPhone 12 shipped in October, so it's been like 5 months. In 5 months, there are already more than 10 free capture apps for the iPhone. So a lot of developers There's lots of developers building for that. We're integrated with most of those apps. And yeah, we're seeing more and more people joining the club of people making 3D captures.
Yeah. So, what's your favorite 3D scanning app?
There isn't a real answer to that. I mean, they all have upsides and downsides. It really depends on what you want to scan. And yeah, I love Polycam for scanning spaces and large scenes. I love things like Sidescape or Every Point for more organic scenes and with more detail, like a tree or things like that. I love 3D Scanner app for objects and smaller things. I love Scaniverse for just general use. It works well out of the box. I love Record 3D for volumetric video and things that are in movement. Mm-hmm. And so it really depends on what I scan.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and for our listeners, I really recommend following Alban's hashtags one scan a day and would scan. Those are great hashtags to follow if you like 3D scanning and 3D capture. So Alban, let's get to the latest craze right now, NFTs. I think NFTs will play an important role in the future of metaverses, but I really couldn't believe my eyes when I saw this 70 million price tag of people's works. What do you think about NFTs?
To be honest, I'm still forming my thoughts and educating myself, and I'm actually in the process of writing a blog post about this. I think it's a paradigm shift, and it's going to be a valuable step for the digital world. There is obviously a lot of hype, and there are the big believers and the big haters, and of course there is the environmental issues and all that. And so, if we forget about the environmental issues and assume it's going to be resolved down the line and focus on the core concept, I think it has the potential to solve a lot of things, but it's going to take a while to get there, and a lot of things can already be solved today in different ways. Our mission is to make 3D accessible, and so the concept of scarcity doesn't really solve that. But I think it's interesting because typically on Sketchfab we have all sorts of content. So some of it is actual art that would fit well with the concept of NFT and uniqueness and the art market, and then a lot of it is props and assets that are not art per se. They are just replications, digital twins that are meant for the widest distribution and reuse everywhere in games and social networks and all that. But NFT has a potential to help on those two sides, I think. Certainly it's interesting, and I'm keeping an eye on things. And what's cool is to see that Sketchfab is already powering a bunch of NFTs and people using Sketchfab to display their free work.
Yeah. I saw the other day Mark Cuban was using it. Yeah. So Alban, one of the early use cases for augmented reality was try-on applications like, for example, IKEA AR. But the main bottleneck has always been the effort to create 3D models. I myself had to turn down many projects and customers just because the cost of making 3D models of the products was too high. How recent 3D scanning tools can help in this regard and with e-commerce?
Well, first, I think, the solutions, for LiDAR it's clearly too early, but photogrammetry is at a stage where you can really get, again, it depends on what you're scanning. Like if you sell iPhones, you're not going to use photogrammetry to replicate your phone or screen or any electronic or VR headset. It's going to suck. but for things like shoes and apparel and bags, photogrammetry can work really well. And it's become much faster than it was just a few years ago. It's getting cheaper as well, like typically. So reality capture, which is it's industry leader with Metashape, they just joined Epic and they divided their price by 5. And so I would say that today any brand can start making digital twins of their products, even in-house with a very tiny investment. Like, I don't know, like I think it's maybe $3,000 for a lifetime license of RC. And then you can just use your phone for the capture side of things. And you can really get super high-res digital twins. And so I think there is no excuse left to at least experiment with those things. So challenge is if you have 10,000 products, and in that case, there are a bunch of ways to sort that. One is outsourcing, and so now we have partners who can digitize things at scale. Like people in Asia, we've partnered with some of them. They're able to scan 100 products a day or 500 products a day, and be very competitive on price. And if you look at the impact on conversion rates and ROI of 3D and AR, and the fact that it allows you to output like also 2D content and videos, it's actually becoming cheaper than physical photography to leverage 3D assets for a number of use cases. And so I think we're getting into a place where it pays for itself to invest on digital twins. And then I also think more and more brands are starting to use 3D from the start of the conception of the product. And so they're going to have 3D designs, the 3D assets of the product from day one. And they're going to be able to leverage this as well for things like marketing and so on. And then the third piece of the equation is user-generated content. I mean, we have 4 million assets on Sketchfab. And so you can already find a 3D version of any Nike shoe or any car or other things. And so a lot of it could be reused by either brands or retailers or anyone with a digital twin.
Exactly. So you mentioned photogrammetry. What are your thoughts on the acquisition of capturing reality by Unreal?
What are my thoughts? I think it's good. I think it's an important product, and so it's good that they get more resources to be more ambitious.
Yeah.
It's good that they are cheaper thanks to that. And I mean, it's 1 week old. So it's too early to know what will come from it, but I guess it's good.
Yeah. One of the similar platforms to Sketchfab was Google Poly. What happened to Google Poly, and what do you think about Google's decision on it?
Oh, it's a long story. What happened to Google Poly? I mean, a lot of things. Google Poly was initially created as a sharing solution for tilt brush and blocks. And so it wasn't constructed as a universal sharing platform. It was constructed as a sharing solution for those tools. And so this was already a bias. And then it was started by Google, just like Microsoft started Remix 3D. And all the tech giants always want to start publishing like user-generated publishing platforms, but I think it's not really part of their DNA to be successful at those things. Like at each file format, like photo, video, sound, 3D, all the tech giants tried to launch their own publishing platforms, and it never worked because I think those platforms have to be started in an independent way, being cross-platform and optimizing to be universal.
Yeah.
Whereas all the tech giants are going to optimize for their own needs and don't really have a community DNA. And so this is kind of higher level context. And then, Google kind of shifted their priorities around VR and AR I think they realized it wasn't a mass market endeavor yet, and so they didn't get Google scale or Google traction. And so they can't really, they don't really spend energy on things that don't get millions or billions of users. And so they realized this was not going to get there. And also, we started almost 10 years ago, and we had already started reaching critical mass when they launched. And so I think we have invested more energy and love in our product, and we got more traction.
Uh-huh.
And so they decided to move on, and they actually offered to direct their users to Sketchfab when they did that. And so this week just launched Poly to Sketchfab as a way for Poly users to easily transfer their models from Poly to Sketchfab.
Mm-hmm. Great. So Alban, right now creating 3D scans of objects is easy thanks to LiDAR sensors and many 3D scanning apps, as you mentioned. But we still can't record animations and volumetric videos properly, at least. What do you think about volumetric videos and their potential?
I think it's really cool, even in its current state, through iPhone. I capture the first steps of my kids, and even if it's just one angle, because it's with one phone, what you can already get with iPhone LiDAR volumetric video is just amazing. Like it captures and conveys some things that no other medium can.
Yeah.
And I think volumetric video, it's very early and it's very, intensive, like in terms of compute and data and so on. I think volumetric video gets much more relevant when it's consumed in a spatial way, which is VR and AR. And so this is early.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what is going to be the future way. So there are already solutions, like DevKit, offering solutions to bring multiple cameras to make a full volumetric video. But the way I think about it, is that in the future, there will be depth sensors everywhere. So every room will have a depth sensor in each corner, able to record everything that's happening in a volumetric way. And so you're not going to necessarily rely on your own device to capture some of those scenes. And then I guess once we all have AR glasses, you'll also be able to crowdsource a volumetric video by having like two person looking at the same thing from two different angles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree. Or at least using deep learning is very promising in this area, I think. With just a few angles or just one angle, some of the algorithms can reconstruct the whole body, and I think those are also promising. So Alban, you announced a few months ago that the Sketchfab has become profitable. Congratulations on that. Can you tell us more about the Sketchfab business model?
Sure. So we have two main business models. One is around the content, so letting people buy and sell content, and one is around the technology, so people licensing the technology, so paying to use the viewer and the platform to host and publish and share and embed 3D files. Most of the revenue is on the technology side for now.
Uh-huh.
And it's split in 3 tiers. So we have plans for content creators, so pretty affordable, like $10 a month for your portfolio, private sharing, things like that. And then we have a plan for SMBs, so smaller companies who want to use it for private sharing or e-commerce and all that. And then we have an enterprise version, which is unbranded, so white labeled version of the player, larger volume and full customization, full access to the APIs and all that. Yes, that's our business model.
Mm-hmm. Great. Right now, pitching a Sketchfab, I think, is easy, and VCs should compete to invest. But back in the day when you started, I'm sure it wasn't as easy. Do you have any stories as the co-founder and CEO on raising funds for Sketchfab?
Yeah, I have many stories. That could be an entire podcast in itself, and I'll write about this one day. But yeah, so we did 4 rounds. Each round was very different, and the difficulty of raising is unrelated with the amount you're raising, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
The first one was really hard. I'm a first-time entrepreneur, and it was my first round. It was really hard, and we had no business model, no revenue. The tech was very new. We were in France and all that, and yeah, it almost didn't happen. Like a lot of investors who said yes ended up saying no at the last minute, and so it was a very challenging situation. The second round was also quite challenging. Like, we got a lot of no's, and it took time. There were a number of occasions where we could have raised more easily, but with people we weren't fully aligned on. And I think we always took the risk to wait more to find the investors with the best fit. And that's one of the reasons why we're still here today, is that we've always been aligned with the investors we've agreed to have on board, and and that we were excited about as they were excited about us. And then the third round, our Series A, was super fast. Like, as I mentioned, we had just closed those partnerships with Adobe and Microsoft and Facebook, so we got a lot of momentum, and we had hundreds of thousands of users. And so, the more momentum and leverage you have, the faster it is. And then, so that was in 2015. And then we tried to raise our 4th round in 2017, and this one was super hard and actually didn't happen. Like, I pitched more than 100 investors, and we were in this weird situation where we still had no revenue, but our traction wasn't mass market enough. And we had already raised a lot of money, and so we could have raised, but on bad terms with bad people and with not great people. So we decided to wait, and then we raised a 4th round in 2018, which was pretty fast, like mostly with existing investors, and then a few ones like Brendan, the founder of Oculus. And yeah, this one was pretty smooth.
Great. So what are the future steps for Sketchfab?
Right now we're spending a lot of energy on Sketchfab for Teams and all the new solutions for teams using the product. So, like multiple seats and collaboration and so on. We are modernizing the tech stack, and so rebuilding a lot of the parts to improve the rendering capabilities and the performances of the viewer, and extending the feature set to make it easier to build things like configurators, and offering more features to build more advanced and more robust configurators. And then, we're going to evolve AR and VR support to fully like WebXR, and supporting more of our web features in AR mode. And then we're just at the very beginning of what we do on the content side. And so we're almost 10 years old. Most of that time has been spent on onboarding users and content, and reaching critical mass of content and users. And now we're just entering phase 2, which is leveraging that content, distributing it everywhere, and being kind of the API, the content API for the 3D world, populating all metaverses, all AR glasses, all VR learning platforms, and all that. And so this is quite early. And then, I mean, there are so many use cases around AI and machine learning and all that.
Mm-hmm. Great. So have you thought about cloud rendering? I think it's also an interesting concept.
What do you mean? You mean like streaming?
Yeah. Google and I think NVIDIA also provided some samples for 5Gs. It calculates the angle of your camera, and instead of just putting the whole content, it just show you the frame and renders it on the cloud.
Yeah, so we have an MVP of that for very large files that we unveiled like 2 years ago, called Massive. But it's not some. I mean, we have much more. We don't see this as a main use case for us today, and it's also not very cost efficient, and it's less fluid, and it's less real time. It's less elegant in a number of ways. But yeah, we're keeping an eye on that, and yeah.
Great. So, Alban, as of our last question, how do you envision the future of AR and VR?
Well, I think the future of VR and AR is a device that can do both, that can choose the level of obstruction and of what you see of the outside world.
Yeah.
And a form factor that is regular glasses. And I think when we get there, it has the potential to replace a smartphone. And so, yes, it's going to be infinite screens where you want, at the size if you want. And yeah, we think we have the potential to be, as I mentioned, like the content API to power a lot of AR applications. A bit like how Giphy is the content API for GIFs plugged everywhere from Slack to WhatsApp and all that. So yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Great. Well, Alban, thanks very much for joining the AllThingsXR podcast. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.